I say, Shock Turtle here. You may have seen me recently in the Frozen Princess Turtle Rescue. Today, I'm here to show you how I change into that chariot. It doesn't hurt at all since I really don't exist. I'm just a bunch of pixels that form an illusion in your mind. So that's not real, is it? Here I am as the chariot. Let me tell you about my birth. I began life as clip art on the web. It was a boring flat existence and I had no articulation. For that I needed Photoshop Elements, where I was cut to pieces by the magic lasso tool and separated into layers. Now, for software with respect for my internals, my parts could act independently, articulating at will in time with the action and the needs. Now, having spent my time with Photoshop and being busted into independent layers, it's time to head for Apple's Motion application where my purposeful articulation can begin. Save me somewhere that I can reside undisturbed and where Apple Motion can find me. So, create a new Motion project and drag me in. I'm already here, so look me up with Reveal in Finder to see where my file is. At this point, you are seeing all my layers on top of each other. This is called composited and that's what you see in the movie. But this composite is built up from individual layers. You can solo an individual timeline track layer to see only its content. Here's my shell, tail, rear feet, front feet, head. And again, the whole body composite. Whoa, how big am I really? Remember those pixels in your brain? Well, there are pixels on the screen too and pixels in me. If you look at my pixels 1-to-1 on the screen, I'm really big. So let's cut me down to size, where magic meter mathematical interpolations decide how to get one screen pixel to party with my vast voxels. Pull down the sizing menu and select fit and I will scale down to where you see my entire glory. You want to see a piece of me, punk? For that you need to make my layers active and inactive. Click these toggle boxes to turn layers on and off. Gone. Babies got back. Lost my head but not for long. Here's my hidden side. You may need temporary layers to work on but you'll want to keep those secret in the final rendering. It's time for you to relieve me of my boring flat existence and add new dimensions to my life. Notice these little icons. One's a pile and the other looks like panes of glass darkly. Right click on this group layer to see this menu and toggle on Garth the 3D option and now you've turned my panes into 3D piles and all the layers in my group may now articulate in 3 dimensions. It's very helpful that I don't need to breathe when I run on like that. To see my 3 dimensions we need a camera. Create one with this icon over here. And you'll see that we have a new pull down menu in the upper left of the viewer. The active camera is important because that's the camera that determines what the movie looks like when it's rendered to a video file. Select perspective. And here we are 3 dimensions. Perspective. A vast vanishing phantasmagorical illusion that makes you think that I'm in here and you're out there. Back to the active camera. Active camera is just one of the many views we will need to focus our deft manipulations on the pieces of me that are avidly anticipating articulatory ascendance. Here are the 3D view tools. They also refer to camera but this camera is just what you are seeing now in the Motion application. Don't confuse this with the active camera. As you dolly in and out, I change size here. These sizes of me are only to help you focus your deft manipulation and the look here will not affect the rendering. Now, we'll use the 3D compass tool, which you will see in the lower left corner of the canvas. Hover over the tool until you see the balloon help titled perspective. Clicking the small surrounding icons, you can invoke different views of me in the 3D space. The right view means you are looking at me and the active camera from the right side. From the bottom, and back to perspective. Now you see me and the active camera in the 3D space. Finally, this is the cool virtual reality Tron look that you dreamed about when your privacy was only slightly invaded by IBM punch cards. So, with your fingers out there and me and my objects in here, how do we get hold of things? You can select an object in the timeline, the timeline list or in the layers menu. You select not just an object but a tool. This icon at the lower left selects the 3D transform tool. Here we have selected one of the 3D on-screen controls for the active camera. These controls allow us to change the frame of the camera in 6 ways. 3 rotations and 3 straight line movements known as translations in the X, Y and Z directions. Notice the mini-me in the lower right inset view. Billie Jean was my lover but, no, The kid is not my son. The inset view shows how the active camera sees me as you change the camera angles with the 3D on-screen controls. Thus, the inset view shows what you would see if you were looking through the viewfinder of the camera lens, and the right rectangular yellow frustum in the canvas shows where the camera is located and how the focal plane moves around the center of the frame. There's no pharaoh in that pyramid. What we have here is what we call a framing camera. On the left we'll see the inspector panel with the camera tab selected. There's another type of camera. We select the viewpoint camera. We go back to the top of the slide and the viewpoint camera actually moves like how a camera in your hands would actually move actually. The viewpoint camera allows the active camera to record what the first-person view of what a moving Steadicam would see. The viewpoint camera can provide exciting dynamic senses of movement through the scene, while the framing camera will track an object's movement within the scene. It is also possible to do both, and more, but that's a subject for a later time. You will need to use the 3D view tools now. Pan, orbit and dolly. Not the triplets I spend the summer with, but the tools to slide, spin, and thrust on the canvas to focus on the manipulable objects of your desire. Let's give us a hand. The hand tool lets you move the canvas to see what you need to see. And what you see is me. Let me take you down since I'm going to strawberry fields to picnic with Orbit and Dolly. Scoot back to the 3D transform tool. Now we can rock on like Arno and Penzias shooting pigeons in their cryogenic microwave horn while discovering the weak isotropic sniffling that all started with a big bang. But the focus of attention is not me and that won't do. I was framed and you'll need to pin this one on me again. So, pull down, select that framing camera type in the camera tab of the active camera inspector once again. Did I say camera? Don't call me a chimera. Consider yourself warned. Griffin. Using the on-screen controls you now change what the active camera sees and I stay in the picture. There are more camera controls. Here's how you change the angle of view. As the angle changes the camera moves towards me and away from me. In the inset view, I phantasm and that feels really good. And now we come to it. 3 dimensions. Unlike me, you have been living there all the while, and while you were living there you might imagine you know what it is. But when you put your words and fingers to it here you will find that you do not know what you think you know. Although the inset view simply showed my changing size. If I were to move, the quickness of my growth or shrink will change, and that will make all the difference to the look of me and mine in a particular scene. Okay Crackerby. For this control or for any control parameter, you can change the value directly by typing a number. Precisely. And that's what the number will be when you type its precise value. Controls. Lots more. Senor. And each of these will affect my phantasms. Feels good for me anyway, but it needs to look good for you too, Lou. Once again, I am Chariot and that chariot is what my ascendant articulation will create. Look closely and you see that I have more parts differently shaped than the layers I have now. It's not just the motion but the shape of the pieces that must change to make me into this symmetric chariot. Now back to the motion app. As we assuage my ascendancy and move my parts in time, it's very important to control the timeline. At the top of the timing pane, move the playhead all the way to the left to 0 where this movie starts. Up to the camera menu. We've been looking at the active camera and now it's time to see me in 3D again. Perspective. Top view. Hey, Dolly darling, move back some please. A bit twisted here. I'm that white line uppermost in the canvas. The camera is crooked. We need it looking straight at me. In the inspector, we'll check to see what type of camera we have. It's the framing camera and we need to adjust the point that the camera is looking at. When we've selected the framing camera, the X, Y and Z coordinates and angle rotations operate on the anchor point on the center of the frame. When we select the viewpoint camera, the coordinates and rotations operate on the anchor point of the camera. We want the frame and camera on the 0 of the axis with 0 rotation. Conveniently confusing as well, the coordinates operate from the last setting, so it takes a bit of back and forth to get both the frame and the camera to the 0 points. So, you curse and recurse this recursion in the Inspector Camera and Properties tab, tweaking the coordinate parameters until you get the camera and frame in the positions you want. The more you polish it gets, so it will get easier the more you do this kind of thing. And here it is, rectilinear and aligned in the top view. Back to the perspective view. Switch the view often to keep your head in the game. Here's looking at you, kid. Different views help with different deft manipulations. Now, we'll prepare me to move. First, we need to know where I am. We'll change my group coordinates so that I'm zeroed in the coordinates and the rotation. Notice that my properties in the inspector show zeros but I look slanted. Over to the right side with a nice dolly darling push back we see that I'm straight on the up and up. That's right. That's what the people say. And with the view from the top I'm straight on till morning as well. If I'm going to move all of me moves but if I rotate I need to rotate around something and that something is called the anchor point. In the toolbar at the lower left of the canvas, tap and hold to select the anchor point tool. Carefully, moving to highlight the circle in the 3D on-screen controls. Drag the anchor point downwards. But here's a gotcha. We've dragged that circle which allows motion in 2 or more dimensions. So, with Command Z we undo that action and start over. Grabbing the green arrow will restrict the movement of that anchor point to the vertical y-axis so we can get that anchor point centered down at my feet. The blue arrow will move a point in and out along the z-axis and the red restricts movement to the y-axis. Switching to the right view shows the anchor point at my feet and in the XY plane. Here's what the anchor point looks like from the active camera. We're ready to move me. Check that the playhead is at the 0 point. Click on group in the timeline to see all my layers. Make sure I'm a 3D group. There's that pile icon in the layers panel. And in the object menu bar drop down that shows that I'm a 3D group. We're going to add a keyframe to the x-axis rotation. A keyframe captures parameters like this x-axis rotation coordinate. At the 0 point it captures the fact that I'm still on the up and up. Move the playhead to the end of the timeline. Our timeline is 10 seconds long. And click on the x-axis rotation keyframe again to make the parameter independently available for changes. The small arrows to the left and the right of the orange keyframe icon will shift the playhead to the previous and the next keyframe. Select the 3D transform tool. This makes the on-screen controls active. Now, I can flap like the rare turtle dove which I'm not, but that bird is Dolly's dream date. We're at the first keyframe at the 0 point so I need to return to the up and up. So, back up in the inspector properties transform rotation x coordinate type 0 to straighten me out, up and ascendant. Use the little right arrow to jump the playhead to the next keyframe at the end of our timeline. Using the on-screen controls, you can now flap me into the position where I should end up. Precisely. 90 degrees sounds flat enough so type in the 90 to get the degrees desired without the need for a diploma. Back to the beginning. And now we have it. Animation. I get to fall flat since the motion app will interpolate between the keyframe parameters and smoothly change the x-axis rotation from the 0 to the 90. From up to flat. We're looking at the active camera looking how the movie will look in the rendered video. And my head has fallen off screen out of the frame. If I'm going to take this fall I'd like you to see the whole thing so we need to invite Dolly Darling here to show us her moves. To dolly the camera back we can select the camera and increase its Z coordinate. The camera will move away from me and you will see more of my glory. As I fall now all of me and my layers stay in frame. If I'm alone in the frame we don't need to worry about the speed of the fall since we can speed it up later. If there are other objects around me then it's trickier since their speeds need also to match mine. Kaboom. Heads up and I need mine to behave. Select the layer of my head. I fall flat on my face but I'd like to keep looking at you while I do. Kid. Over by the properties panel we have another tab called behaviors and I have none now. Opening the library. We see a basic motion behavior called point at. This behavior will allow my head to look at the camera no matter how my group moves. Drag the point at behavior onto the layer of my head. Now I have the point at behavior in my head layer, but I need to point at something. Drag the camera into the square icon called the drop zone well. Now the motion application is really working for us. By adding the point at behavior to my head layer, and by pointing at the camera, as I fall over now, you see that I keep looking at the camera. Switching to the perspective view, you can see that I have no concerns about the bones in my neck as my head rotates relative to my body. This point at behavior is essential since I'm really flat and just a white line from the side. If I moved through the scene without the point at behavior you'd see me shrink to that white line which is very distracting and not good for the story. So, it's with keyframes, behaviors, 3D on-screen controls and a lot more work that you could take me apart, bend me, shape me any way you want to, forming my layers such to move in the space, turning from my boring flat existence into that chariot. Until next time, may your antecedents ascend and may your layers point at your goals ever in your favor. Shock Turtle fading to black.